Chapter 33, Menstrual Rites, Rites and Taboos. The first measure of time was menstrual time, and from this women developed lunar calendars in ancient astrology. Colleges of women, moon colleges of Hera, womb giver of laws, were able to influence conception and birth through dream control. Communing with the body through dreams gave them self-knowledge through the cycle. It is possible to have dream knowledge of conception, of pregnancy, before any physical signs appear. In the experience of one of the authors, within 2 to 3 days after intercourse, the body tells one in a dream that conception has occurred, along with the correct future of the sex of the fetus. It happened 3 out of 3 times. All this is chemical information, which our brains as electrochemical information centers have access to. Translating chemical information into consciousness via dreams is a matter of receptivity and technique, a technique ancient women surely practiced because it works. In The Wise Wound, Shuttle and Redgrove speculate that primal women might have even learned to menstruate from the new moon or dark moon. Further, that perhaps they used drugs that were not only mind expanders, but also contained steroid substances related to the human sex hormone, a steroid that could abort the uterine lining, this giving women great sexual sensitivity and also independence from unwanted reproduction and from men. We do feel the lunar tides in our bodies, and the water in our bodies sees the moon as the crystalline structures of water alter or resonate with the moon passing overhead. Women unconditioned by the pejorative patriarchal taboos against the menstrual cycle were surely in fine tune with all its phases. They knew in their bodies and dreams the possibilities of the moon. To know something is to be it. We neglect her rights at our cost. We no longer contain our cycle. Under patriarchy, we are chained to it in fear, shame, annoyance, and under the constant threat of unwanted pregnancy. Under patriarchy, menstruation is a punishment rather than a gift, i.e., an advantage or talent. Christianity, Judaism, Islam, and other father god religions trace the evil of women to menstruation. Menstruation is the visible bloody sign of the serpent, of the devil, and the female body. Patriarchal ontology states that all evil flows from this original female evil, moonblood. Menstruation was seen by biblical men as the curse of God laid upon women for her sin of Eden, and the curse, it is called even today. The European Inquisition probed into women's blood cycle, dream life, and trance experiences, declaring that any woman possessed by a pythonic, oracular menstrual spirit must burn. This idea also originates in the Bible. The Old Testament patriarchs quite intentionally set themselves against the lunar psyche in women and in men who are half female, in their desire to destroy the goddess religion and the goddess within us all. Because of this, the menstruating womb became the devil of patriarchy. The only good woman is a pregnant woman, etc. And the 300-year plus years of European Christian witch hunting has been accurately called 9 million menstrual murders. When women were burned for practicing our natural mooncrafts of midwifery, hypnotism, healing, dowsing, herbal and drug use, dream study, and sexual pleasure, crafts that go back to the Stone Age and were passed down from mother to daughter for over 50,000 years. Since this persecution, European women at least have suffered an extreme non-alignment with their internal lunar processes. European and American women, however, hard we try, rarely get back in touch with the lunar chemical information because we live in isolation from each other and the moon, and an environment hostile to the moon is anything but a rocket launch base or a gigantic neon billboard in the sky. Men in patriarchal societies learn or reveal a great jealousy and fear of natural women, of the sexual, mental, and spiritual abilities of fully evolved women living in harmony with the consciousness of our own bodies. The menstrual taboo is the consequence of this fear and resentment as they are projected back on to women's lives. Under patriarchy, all life is dualized. Women also are dichotomized, cut in two. There is the good little ovulating wife, who is supposed to be passive and not very sexual. And it's hard for even a woman to feel sexy cleaning a toilet bowl. And then there is the witch, the sex fiend, whore, scarlet woman, read again of active dynamic menstrual sexuality. As both female cycles and the wise wound show, there are two poles to women's sexuality. The pole of ovulation, which tends to express itself in terms of wanting to surrender. Its white, clear discharge is called the river of life and is acceptable in patriarchy because it is receptive and fertile. And the pole of menstruation, before, during, and after, which expresses itself in wanting to take erotic initiative. To capture and demand the red flow is called the river of death, and its multi orgasmic and aggressive sexuality is taboo in patriarchy. Our menstrual sexuality, which is non fertile, is called masculine and castrating by Freudian types who share in the cultural fear of mature women. In early patriarchy and in some contemporary indigenous cultures that have been colonized by misogynistic religions, the menstrual taboo is openly punitive. It codifies sexual hostility in societies where women are treated as currency in men's affairs. Under the menstrual taboos, women were to be punished for our own powers, sexual, reproductive, psychic powers. We were banished to the menstrual hut, called unclean and dangerous to the man and his laws and his gods. In some tribal communities, we were imprisoned in dark cages or rooms for months, for as long as 3 years with the first menstruation. In American Indian cultures, on the other hand, the menstruating woman is seen for what she is, a powerful life source. As daughters of the copper woman shows us, Native American women have worked to keep alive for generations their affirmative and celebratory customs surrounding female puberty, including years of physical training to make women strong in both body and mind. They did this despite constant opposition from Christian missionaries and preachers who always view women's blood customs as savage and satanic. Underneath the colonizing misogyny of Christianity and Islam, Black American women too have managed to keep alive ancient puberty and menstrual customs, which are energizing for women. Worldwide, much of women's sacred blood rites and magical instruments have simply been stolen by patriarchy, or if not co opted, repressed. Male initiation rites can express an envy and awe of women, as men cut or wound their penises in imitation of bleeding vaginas. These rites reenact birth and menstruation, but they also symbolize a violent separation from women, earth, and the maternal, a more guilty theft of a true participation. As Margaret Mead and others have shown, the more warlike and authoritarian a society is, the stronger its menstrual taboo. In such societies, a paranoid emphasis is placed on women's corrupting and debilitating influence, and men's need to overpower, dominate, and devalue her. Male training in aggression is linked with taboos for both men and boys against any knowledge or contact with women's natural functions. It would seem that when there is no acknowledgement of women's bleeding, then there is instead a male acting out of ritual and violent bloodshed and war. Warlike, aggressive male societies are in rivalry with women over which sex sheds the most sacred blood. War is the men's response to women's ability to give birth and menstruate, all three bloodshedding rituals. Women's blood rites give life. However, while men's bloody rituals give only death. To compensate for this, such authoritarian societies culturally repress and degrade women's blood functions while elevating the murderous war to an holy act. The women's menstrual mysteries of inspiration become, in war god worshipping patriarchy, the mysteries of resisted knowledge, repression, madness. Patriarchal societies are founded on a crime. This crime is not the murder of the father, as Freud would have us to believe. It is the rape and scorn of the mother. This is the unconscious horror. This is the unconscious horror that each girl child inherits. And unlike male castration anxiety, rape anxiety is often all too common and reinforced by the daily reality of the act and the threat of rape. Men's so-called fear of castration is simply a fear of losing command over women. In patriarchal society, which equates domination of women with manhood, if Western males have any legitimate fear of castration, it derives from the act of circumcision, which is a terrible thing to inflict on a male infant. But this custom comes from the Father God of the Bible. It doesn't come from women or any great mother religion. Living constantly under the steel roof of patriarchy's criminal misogyny, women are forced to bend to and accept, on pain of ever reverberating punishment and terror, men's paranoid projections. Women, as long as we fear punishment for our powers, and as long as we are economically dependent on men, must accept that our bodies are unclean and deficient. Under patriarchy, the mother is feared and hated, quite crazily, both for her power and her weakness. Everything a man cannot courageously accept about himself is projected onto his mother or his wife, or onto any random woman walking down the street. Until yesterday, women were policed by the professionals and also gynecologists and psychiatrists who acted as cultural reinforcers of the rules of femininity and who blamed our ills like menstrual depression and pain on our failure to be feminine. How many men have grown rich being in the business of telling women what we're supposed to be? Obviously, patriarchy wants us to be something that is not natural for us. Otherwise, we wouldn't become crazy or sick trying to achieve it. Until yesterday, once a month witches were given drugs and electroshock treatment by the modern Inquisition, members of the psychotherapeutic professions. Now, thanks to feminism and more women doctors, menstrual depression and pain, including premenstrual syndrome, are being seriously studied and treated with intelligence and concern, not the traditional contempt. But we can't forget how many women just yesterday were thrown into psychiatric wards by husbands and physicians because our clinical menstrual taboos rendered everyone stupid about basic life functions. Women must understand that the object of taboo is also the object of strong desire. Menstrual blood is a powerful sexual element, and ancient men responded to women's rhythms. But to unyielding patriarchal man, whose entire self-concept depends on the fact that he is not a woman, any primal response to women's bloods and rhythms is frightening. He fears to lose control. He fears his loss of ego. He fears empathizing with a woman. He fears melting into the other in the sexual act. He has a lot of fears. And so the heterosexual act inevitably becomes a reaction to fear. It becomes violation and rape. To repress his fears, he takes on military terminology, sees himself as invading the woman's body, and becomes his sexual victim, his prisoner of war. Simply because she had sex with him, engaged in battle, allowed herself to be invaded, he must treat her with contempt, as he would treat any loser. Few men in patriarchy are perceptive enough to realize that they themselves have lost a great deal, including the pleasures of sex. Men have mutilated their own sexuality along with trying to mutilate women's. Ejaculation is not necessarily the same as orgasm. Rites was trying to investigate the difference between a genital reflex and a total mind-body response. Ancient Taoist and Tantric teachings, originating in Chinese and Indian matriarchies, taught men sexual techniques that suited women. Ancient women had strong genital pride and knowledge, and in no way envied, feared, or imitated men. Women were the initiators of sexual knowledge. Women's collectives, no doubt, at the time of their menstrual flows, withdrew from the men to meditate, to practice lesbian love, to commune with the goddess and body prayer. For women, there is no separation between sex and spirit. Patriarchy exists by demanding that sex and spirit be opposites, and then repressing and punishing women for contradicting such a fiat. Even in the menstrual huts, a custom enforced and twisted by the patriarchy, women could still gather together and confirm their own identity, to sing and tell stories. At least they knew that their menstrual uncleanliness was a misogynistic taboo. But in female cycles, Paula Wiedeger makes it very clear that the modern Western world, because there's no outward ritual signs of menstrual taboo, it is even more insidious and harmful to us by women. At her first menstruation, the young modern girl is abandoned by her culture. She is made to feel that her body and its rhythms are a biological impediment to freedom and fun. The subliminal message she receives from her culture is that a properly functioning body is male and non cyclic. On the job, at school, also work is defined as a male activity. If she wants to be equal at work, she must function like a male, i.e., non cyclically. All legal and cultural disputes about women being pregnant or nursing at work or nursing in public derive from the fact that all workspace, all public space in the West is defined in terms of the non-cyclic male body. Women cannot enter the workforce or enter public life unless they agree to act through their bodies as though their bodies were functionally male also. To act as though one could function like a male is to suppress the fact that one is actually female. The menstrual hut is no longer to one side of the village. It's now constructed in women's own hearts and minds as a very secret place where we take care of all of our female functions while trying to act as though they weren't happening. When it comes to menstruation, we are female in secret, posing as male in public. In fact, with the popularity of panty shields, the entire cycle from ovulation, discharge to menstrual blood can now be kept so discreet, i.e., hidden, that any woman can become the vice president of IBM. In our secret hearts and minds, though, which our menstrual huts continue to be very real, fear of men's, the world as a possession of men, negative and punitive responses to menstruation, to our whole female cycle. Female sex objects abound, but they are all man-made. And this is the last time you saw, when is the last time you saw a centerfold with hairy armpits, hairy legs, and a blood flow? The young girl of the modern West learns from all of these subliminal signals to distrust, to dislike, to be ashamed of her own body and feelings, and those of other women. The femaleness she knows, body hair, sweat, monthly blood flow, menstrual odor, ovulation, discharge, must be hidden, taken care of in secret, while the femaleness men want to see, their own, must be enhanced, publicly flaunted. Whether she feels like doing this or not, she sees all the other women doing it. The message is that she must depend on something outside herself, men, male taste, for her self-definition. And she is on her own and isolated. The modern community of women exists only to show her how to hide her femaleness. She comes crazily or with resignation to associate menstruation with hurts, wounds, body waste, disabilities, shame, curtailment of her own freedom. She comes to believe her lack of freedom comes from nature, her own biology, rather than resulting directly from patriarchal oppression and male fear. And so the menstrual taboo has been one of the most successful methods devised by men to undermine self-acceptance, self-understanding, and self-confidence in women. It acts as a constant confirmation of a negative self-image. Most complaints about the advertisement of personal products on television came from women. Unfortunately, their complaints are not directed at the commercial exploitation of women's bodies by male industries. No, women complain such ads are in bad taste. They do not want their shame, their secret femaleness discussed in public. Those ads belong in the menstrual hut. Only dependent motherhood is celebrated and recognized as legitimate in patriarchy, and sexuality is presented as reproduction or naughty sin rather than as a profound emotional experience. Sexual passion is not seen as an attribute of femininity. The only way our culture can handle women's sexuality is in pornography, a male distortion that reveals patriarchal puritanism and fearful fastidiousness like a funhouse mirror reveals your face. Women who cannot or will not accept the taboos are still punished, as we have been punished for 2,000 years in the patriarchal world, as lesbians, unmarried mothers, thinkers, artists, witches. One form of punishment is culturally mandated rape, which is clearly increasing as women struggle for freedom. The message is clear. Only when we women give up our sexual autonomy and our right to be independent and creative, only when we give up ourselves and accept patriarchal male definitions of femininity as passive, negative, and receptive, only then will we be treated humanely. Only then will we be treated with patronizing smiles and door openings as something just a little less than male. It is male fear, hatred, and envy that has been so long tried to turn our female abilities into incapacities. And despite all suave veneer of advanced Western culture, it is gut level male fear, hatred, and envy that women must fight to reverse the field. Both female cycles and the wise wound speak at great length about the menstrual epidemic among modern civilized women. As much as 90% of all women suffer from some form of distress, pain, cramps, or depression in connection with menstruation. Severe cramping is now being treated with prostaglandins. Some depression is related to menstrual edema, but depression is also anger turned inwards or knowledge withheld. When violence is done to our nature, it talks back in irregular and disharmonious ways. The attempts at detaching oneself from it simply lead to the body language of illness. When we menstruate, we are more psychologically open and vulnerable. Because of this, we are more unable to accept injustices, deceits, and distortions. And so our stored up rage and sexual frustrations are likely to burst out at this time. Penelope Shuttle claims that painful bleeding, backache, and cramps can be relieved by an orgasmic experience. But because of the menstrual taboo and men's fear of women's blood, most heterosexual women are not able to live out their heightened and powerful menstrual sexuality. The menstrual cycle deeply links body, soul, mind, and traditionally male doctors have viewed women as hormone robots. They have a hard time conceiving us as souls and minds. Menstrual tension is also caused by an increased need to dream and to meditate. This was the time, remember, when ancient women experienced prophetic dreams and went into trance states. This is the monthly transformation and rebirth of the ego self. The wise wound talks of children's awareness of their mother's menstrual clock. The breath and taste of blood is our first experience at birth, and we can smell our mother's blood each month. We are aware of her unhappiness and frustration. Our children are aware of ours. Men are also influenced from childhood by their mother's cycles. If menstruation were not a taboo, but an open primary life experience for all people, we could all deal with it. Long overdue is research into male behavior and sexual attitudes towards menstruation and menopause as well. It does no good to educate girls and boys about the clinical aspects of puberty, menstruation, sex, reproduction, while never tackling the psychological, cultural, and religious attitudes that make these natural experiences into such a problem for everyone. The very religions that have turned human sexuality into a pathology and nightmare should not be allowed to determine how public school children learn about sex. Most of our American misogyny, especially ideas about menstrual uncleanliness, comes from the Bible. For this reason alone, the Bible should be kept from public schools as a major source of the cultural defamation of women. Surely the First Amendment should protect young girls from being told God made them to be unclean and in need of monthly purification. More study need to be done also on the effects of birth control pill and IUD on premenstrual symptoms and the cyclic experience in general. It has been assumed that women will tolerate any menstrual evil in exchange for effective contraception, and in short run, this might be true. We have yet to see long-term effects of reproductive technology on women's whole being, mind, body, and soul. Menopause is the end of the menstrual cycle. In patriarchal culture, it is also treated as the end of a woman's sexual identity. This reveals how totally female sexuality is equated with reproduction in the patriarchal primate brain. and in opposition to the facts of female evolution. The menopausal woman is portrayed almost exclusively in Western culture as a sad, ridiculous, and powerless creature. This is not so in many other cultures, including Native American, Hindu, African, where the older woman is accorded greater respect and actually comes into her own middle age, enjoying maximum freedom, independence, authority, and community influence after her childbearing years are over. With feminism, European and American postmenopausal women are also enjoying a renaissance of sorts, starting new occupations, returning to school, traveling, and experimenting with non-traditional lifestyles. Whether the reawakening and enjoyment of new powers extends to her sex life, however, the contradiction in our culture is that women are seen by men as sexually attractive when young and fertile, precisely during the years when we are menstruating, and also seen as sexually dangerous. Women must, however, not show any disturbing signs of that menstruation or cyclicity. We are taught that we are reproductive functions and that we are valuable only as long as we can reproduce. All the suppressed fear and envy of women that men feel for us during our fertile years is let loose in the form of male mockery and outright hatred for the older woman. Men of middle age, on the contrary, are often at a peak of their professional, economic, and cultural powers. Sexually, they're much less empowered than middle-aged women, and often they attempt to mask this by becoming even more insufferably egotistical and dominant. Or, with their cultural and economic empowerment, they buy younger women or a younger wife. It is not that the postmenopausal woman has become less sexual. The opposite is true, but that men lose their sexual interest in her. One reason being that male sexuality is still primate sexuality, and primate sexuality is obsessively reproductive. Dominating fertile females is the badge of macho primatehood. Traditionally, older women have ended up pretending they have no sexuality. They've become sexually invisible or culturally sexless. Recently, also with feminism and the discovery that older women can be very interesting people, it has become trendy, if not always acceptable on Main Street, for older women to be coupled with younger men. This is a very ancient pagan situation and good for us. Another option is a lesbian relation and a long-term relation with another woman. This is another pagan solution, always subliminal in Western culture. With current life expectancy, the average woman in the West has about 25 sexual active years in front of her after the decay of her ovaries and the ending of the fertility cycle. Women in society must adjust to this. We cannot go back to spending 1/4 of our lives, perhaps the sexiest time of our lives, as asexual zombies. Our culture, if it is to be ours, will also have to begin adjusting, responding positively to women's monthly rhythms and sexual and emotional charges, the whole range of female being and potential. For this to happen, of course, we women must utterly transform life and society to be able, once again, to tune into the goddess within us. Such a transformation will have to be genuinely bloody, i.e., it must affirm women's blood.